Hi, this is Mr. Wedge, and I hope everybody's doing okay and you're not going crazy from being stuck inside your house. If the weather's good, get outside and play. One of the things I do in the spring when the weather starts to get nice and it warms up a little bit is my son and I make syrup. So today we're going to do some still life drawing, and it helps if you pick some objects that mean something to you. They're not just random. So I picked objects that have to do with syrup or eating pancakes, which are two of my favorite things. Making syrup and eating pancakes. So we go outside and we drill holes in the trees, little holes in the maple trees that we have, and then we use a hammer. And here's just like a little wooden hammer that my son uses to help me tap in the spiles, they're called, in the trees. And then we get the sap out of it, and then we boil the sap and we have syrup, and then we put them in these bottles. So I got three objects that kind of have something to do with each other. I got a syrup bottle, an empty one. So I'm going to set that over here. And I've got this hammer, and then I've got a stick of butter, because we put butter on our pancakes. So they all have something in common. They all have something to do with one another. And I'm going to kind of arrange them so that they look interesting. You know, you could overlap things like this. You could have something flat, you could have something tall, like this bottle is tall, and then these things are flat, so I could kind of arrange them like this. So you just want to get some objects and set them up so they look interesting to you, and then you're just going to do your best to look at the shapes you see and try to draw this picture. So you're going to have to just trust me. You can't see my still life, but I found three objects and I set them up how I thought they would look good. And I'm going to try my best to draw them on this piece of paper with this marker. And a still life is just objects on a table. That's all it is. That are still. So they're not moving. And you want to make sure nobody comes along, like your brother or sister doesn't mess with them, because you're going to have to look at the shapes you see and try to draw them. So I'm looking at this still life, and you can't see it, but for me the hammer is the closest to me. So I'm going to draw that first. I'm going to draw it near the bottom of my paper. And I'm looking at the shapes I see, and I see this, the head of the mallet or the hammer right there. But I also see the side of it. So it's like a cylinder, and it comes up. And there's like a little spot where the handle goes in. And it's round on this end. So there's just a cylinder. Here's the side of the cylinder and the top of it for this hammer. And I can also see the handle, and the handle kind of goes way across, way across my still life picture, and it kind of cuts through it, and it connects the left side of my picture to the right side of the picture. And I can actually see the end of the handle right there too. So there's this mallet, and then there's some overlapping because I put the mallet on top of the stick of butter. So now I have to kind of look at those shapes and try to draw those as best as I can. And for your still life drawing, you could use whatever objects you want, but they should have something in common, and they should have some meaning. It shouldn't just be random. So there we go. This is this stick of butter is a rectangular prism. It's almost like a square or a rectangle that's been stretched out, so it's 3D. And if you notice, I'm looking and I'm seeing some overlapping. So it looks like this handle is in front of the stick of butter. So that's how I drew it. Just how I see it. So you're going to have to kind of, you could squint your eyes, you could step back and look at it, but you're going to do your best to look at the shapes that you see. So now I'm doing my best to draw this syrup bottle. And I'm drawing it a little bit small, but that's okay because it's kind of far away from me. And again, there's more overlapping because it's in the back. It doesn't have to be a realistic still life. It doesn't have to look like a photo. Pablo Picasso is one of my favorite artists, and he looked at the shapes he saw, but then he turned them and twisted them and changed the size and flattened them out to try to make a more interesting looking picture. That's not just a boring, you know, normal. If you draw a picture and it just looks like a photograph, then you could have just taken a photograph. But You know, you're allowed to be an artist here and make it look a little bit different. So if you can't draw it perfectly, don't be upset about that. You just want something that looks interesting, because nobody's going to see this still life that's on the table. They're just going to see your drawing. So do the best you can. You might see some highlights, some reflective things. You might see some shiny parts like that. Glass is hard to draw, so I just outline it and then I put some blobs in there, some shapes. You could color this in if you have markers or crayons. If you see details on things, you could draw those. And I'm going to spend more time on this still life drawing, but I'm doing the best I can to just look at it like it's shapes. I'm not really thinking about what the things are, I'm just looking at the shapes. And once you get those, then you can start to go in and do details and try to make things look more realistic or more true to life. You know, more like how they really look. So there we go. It says it twice on here, so I'm writing this twice. Also, if you know how to shade, you know, with light and dark, that's a great thing to do. So on my still life right here, I'm looking and I can see this side is a much darker than the other side of the hammer, because the light's coming from above. I'm in my kitchen right now. That's a great place to draw a still life. And the light's coming from above and it's hitting the top of the hammer, but it's not hitting the side. But I could see a little bit of shadow peeking out over here. And I'm using hatching right now, if you know how to do that. But this would be a lot easier to do with a pencil. I couldn't find a pencil, so I'm just using a marker. I'm borrowing it from my kids. Alright, so there we go. And oh, this side of the butter is actually a little bit darker than the top. So I can shade that, and that'll help make it look more real and interesting. If I can find some crayons, I'm going to color this in too. But get 3 to 5 objects. You know, 6 is probably too many, and 2 is probably not quite enough. So 3 to 5, 3, 4, or 5 objects, and start with the big basic shapes. Get those figured out first. If you see overlapping, that's good. So once you arrange it in an interesting way, and it kind of goes like up and then over and then up and over, and your eye kind of bounces through the still life. And I've got this big area here, and I balanced this area with this area down here. So I kind of like this drawing. And I'm looking for more shadows, and the more you spend, the more you're going to see things. A bug. You're going to see shadows and highlights, and I'm noticing there's a little shadow underneath this hammer handle that I didn't notice before. So I can add some shading on the bottom of it. I can make it really dark on the edge here where it's furthest from the light. I'm seeing some shadows underneath things. If you see a shadow on the object, that's called a form shadow. And if you see a shadow under an object, that's called the cast shadow. There's a little shadow under this hammer right here. And then there's this long shadow that comes over here. I can see that on the table. And it kind of disappears. So I'm working a lot here. I did a pretty good still life drawing, but now I'm just going to keep going, and I'm going to keep adding shadows. I'm going to add, there's texture here because this is wood. This mallet is wood. So I accidentally scratched it with the marker when I was drawing, but that's okay because there's actually like a crack that goes right through here, I just noticed, on this hammer. And there's another one there. So now I'm seeing all these textures, and I haven't even started to add color yet, but already it looks really nice. So find 3 to 5 objects, find a quiet place where nobody's going to mess with you or bother you, and set up your still life so it looks interesting. Think about overlapping, think about the big shapes first, and then do the details. And don't forget to sign it. And I hope everybody stays safe and healthy and has some fun too. So work hard, have fun.